Hi, I'm Andy Schmuckler. I was kind of slow to recognize that the problem I was looking at here in America of a rising force of fascism was part of a global trend. I didn't recognize that back then, uh, nor did I recognize it when I sort of took on the rising force of fascism in America back in 2004, kind of full time. But eventually, I started to notice, as other people had noticed before me, that something was going on that wasn't just in the United States. Uh, in Turkey, in India, in Brazil, and on the sides of various uh, European nations, there would be these rising force of fascism that was visible. And it kind of seemed a little mysterious. If you have seemingly unconnected places uh, moving in the same direction, you figure that there must be something connecting them so to make them move together in the same direction. I could add to that. Brexit was maybe in that category, but in Germany and in France, even Sweden, um, with its history of social democracy, elected a very far right bunch to rule the country. So, what's going on? I raise the question without claiming to know the answer. I think it's something of a mystery when, if indeed there's something going on that accounts for Brazil going with that fascist down there. Fortunately, they were able to get rid of him. And at the same time, India with its Hindu nationalism form of fascism there. Uh, if there's any connection between them, it's not visible. It's not visible. It's kind of an interesting mystery. We talk about it if you go to my website, abetterhumanstory.org, and do a search for the word zeitgeist, Zeitgeist. It means the spirit of the times. It's a beautiful mystery when things that don't seem to be connected are. And so you have to find out what is the connection. And I've been thinking about, why is it gone that this kind of ugliness has arisen uh, in more places. I mean, Israel is in the grip of its most fascist elements. Uh, what a shame for people to have the worst among them deciding, creating the face they present to the world, which is a problem that we Americans now have to face again, but even more so than the first time when he was embarrassing Donald Trump to be our president. That was an embarrassment. And he's part of this pattern. And I was slow to see. I was tuned in on the fascistic tendencies of Limbaugh and Gingrich and Fox News and Karl Rove and Dick Cheney, both operating the W presidency, however that worked out. But we moved in a lot in that direction. As some people observed and argued, fascism's been rising in this country since, I would say, the early 90s. It's also been happening in other countries. The democratic Turkey has been turned more into an authoritarian state. Democratic Hungary has been turned more into a fascist regime. And who knows what lies ahead for the United States in in the wake of this absolutely potentially catastrophic election. I think we should be hopeful, but one of the things which troubles me is I don't think that the liberal world has adequately processed the extraordinarily dark meaning of the fact that all of that could have been displayed before the American electorate, and they would choose him. That we shouldn't lose sight of whatever it is that exposes. And I think that, for example, when people are talking nowadays about Biden pardoning Hunter, they're talking as if the world still works the way it used to work, and it doesn't. Not in the American democracy of this moment. We shouldn't lose sight of the fact that a guy who shouldn't hardly get any support from Americans, who wouldn't, according to me, they would never have won support in Reagan's Republican world, and much less in Eisenhower's. That's what I assert. I can't prove that. But I think this is something that liberal America hasn't absorbed yet in the way that it must, in terms of raising questions about what is the nature of the problem and what role do the American people play in it, and what can be done to retrieve the American people so that something so unthinkable as electing to the presidency a guy that everybody should know committed a whole bunch of crimes, some of them maybe the most serious in American history, a guy who lies all the time, a guy who showed us in the pandemic he doesn't give a damn about anybody but himself. I mean, what do you need to see? Oh, do you want to find out whether he's guilty of being an adjudicated rapist, an adjudicated insurrectionist, an extortionist that tried to undermine one of our allies who's facing our main adversary in the world, Putin? What do you need to see? Well, this is calls for asking more fundamental questions. But as for getting back to the question about why has fascism risen in these times, not just the American problem, but the one that has got. We're about to have the three main nuclear powers in the world under basically dictatorial fascistic regimes. The United States with Trump, Russia with Putin, and China with Xi. This is the world that we've gotten to. What can we learn from it? What are the reasons? And I don't know the answers, but I've given it a lot of thought, enough to be able to put down a couple of points that seem to me important enough to warrant attention. One is something that one can observe as a fact, not something we liberals would want to have be a fact, but if it's a fact, we got to look at it as a fact, and that is that immigration, maybe it should be said, too much immigration or past a certain point to not be evaluative about it, that a liberal policy regarding immigration and with compassion for the immigrants and the asylum seekers and all that good stuff, that it has, past a certain point anyway, it does damage to the overall strength of liberty, democracy, all the good stuff. That wherever there are a lot of people who are not feeling comfortable and accepting of the extent to which foreign peoples have come into their country to live. Well, to that extent, the liberal approach to immigration feeds fascism at the expense of the basic liberal way of ordering the world. We've seen it in the United States that immigration has been used to break things apart. I think Brexit is partly a phenomenon of that. Also, when the Syrian civil war generated such a huge number of immigrants spilling out of the Middle East and up into Europe, it had the effect of feeding fascist forces in Germany, where Merkel was more welcoming of taking care of these people. Then it turned out to be politically prudent. It was the one time she got into real trouble with the German people, as they did not like the extent to which she opened the door. And meanwhile, other immigrants have been moving up into Sweden, for example, where there have been, I gather, there have been problems of criminality of immigrants in Sweden. More so, I think, than in the United States, where the Republicans make so much of it. But in any event, that also has fed Swedish fascism, which is something that 40 years ago one could hardly have conceived of. And Hungary also. I believe that Orban's fascistic regime was fueled by anti-immigrant, exploiting anti-immigrant sentiment. So I think part of the rise of fascism has got to do with a problem of immigration. And if we want to preserve the free world and not have fascism continuing to rise, one place to look is, I would propose, that people with liberal values should sacrifice some of their liberal preferences regarding immigration in order to avoid generating the kinds of passions that led to Brexit, that have made Le Pen's party powerful in France, and that in the wake of of Merkel's decision to take so many immigrants, it strengthened whatever that AFib is not the right word, but the for Deutschland right-wing party. So I think that we, in the world at least as we are now, there are enough people, it seems pretty much all over, that aren't going to have the welcoming, open-hearted feeling about a lot of immigration that we might think is the human ideal. But people being as they apparently are, there is going to be a fair number of people who can be harnessed by the force of fascism because of their unhappiness with too much immigration. So I think that the liberal world needs to scale back some of its proclivities, have these liberal, compassionate values on immigration, in order to protect the larger set of values that are endangered by the rise of fascism. So that's one idea I've got, and I don't know how that would be received in liberal America, but I think that this is one place where, and the Democratic Party seems to have gotten that point when they embraced the anti-immigrant legislation that Trump refused to let get passed because he wanted to run on the issue. That whole thing. It was a very stringent anti. It was written by the anti-immigration policy, a very conservative guy from Kansas, Linkford or something like that. Apparently a decent guy. Anyway, he took a fairly hard line on immigration, helped get a bill together, and Democrats went along with a lot of things that were basically an anti-immigrant wish list from the Republican Party. So the Democrats seem to have already made the recognition that they no longer should be paying the price of letting fascism exploit this as an issue. I think that's the right step. Even though I'm a give me you're tired, you're poor, you're huddled masses yearning to breathe free sort of a guy. And then there's another area to look at, which I don't feel clear about, but I think that there's a real chance that fascism has been coming because the alternative that of the liberal society is not at this point providing people with a sense of the meaningfulness of their lives. Now, I don't know if this is so. This is such a hard kind of a thing to read. But as somebody who's basically, followed a certain amount of American culture up to the 20th century and followed it a lot from the 20th century, I think that the country as a whole no longer collectively feels that it has a mission. That I'm thinking that people are not finding that living the lives that they're living is infused with the meaning of some kind. That we've reached a level of affluence where things are very diminished marginal utility. The striving simply to be able to survive in material terms was always a great motivation in the ages before people became this rich. The consumerist society that tells us that we are what we drive, and so many other things. And I've noticed that, so I'm wondering, is the life that's being offered in a liberal society of our times, leaving unscratched something that people need? We're getting fed. We're really quite secure by any historical standards. But are people feeling a need for something that should be addressed, and that the life that we've organized, affluent liberal democracies of the late 20th, early 21st centuries, that there's an emptiness there? I mean, emptiness makes people vulnerable to something that offers to fill it. And one of the things about the force of fascism is that it's able to put forward people who are able to offer people who aren't getting their needs fed, who are not finding the meaningfulness in life. Okay, here's a way of having something meaningful. You become a warrior against the evil that's been demonized as being on the other side. That's what the fascists do. They make war. They oppress. And they express something that deals with something missing, I'm hypothesizing, in the liberal life that they might otherwise choose. What? So what if there wasn't somebody like Donald Trump to uh, give them this sense of power and of owning the libs and sticking it to them and fighting the fight against the people that they hate? Where did that need come from? Is it a need for enemies or is it a need for meaning? I think the spiritual hole in our civilization now is that what's on offer from where we've taken the liberal world doesn't meet some emotional, spiritual needs for meaning and purpose. And one place where I feel like I can see that, I think that I grew up in an America where we still had a sense of moving toward all that America should be, that that was the job and that we could make progress in that direction. I think, the famous I Have a Dream speech, that's one leader putting out a picture of the America that we should be, where people are judged by the content of their character and not the color of their skin. And then go back to FDR and a famous speech he made in one of those campaigns of his, I See in America, where he held out all these ways in which America might become the world, the America it should be, fulfilling as well as could be done our values as a people. His I See in America envisioned all kinds of wonderful things about dignity and people's needs being met, basically. And it was a picture of a utopia, but one that you could make progress toward. And the idea that you could make progress toward it was a source of meaning, I think, for the American people. That's FDR. That's before my time, but it was still there very strongly in the world as America actually did continue to make progress in a further democratic period, in the Eisenhower presidency, and yeah, we had an image of an America that was going to be better. I don't hear that now. I don't see uh, our leaders, our conversations as envisioning something from where we are toward the ideal that we might achieve. And I think that that's depriving us of one of the most important kinds of meaningfulness, particularly as we are a species whose continuation on this planet is far from assured. I call it a toss-up whether we'll get our act together in the next not so many generations, or whether we'll destroy ourselves. I can't say which is more probable. I think it's really important to be thinking about making progress toward an ideal. I think we need to be envisioning a civilization that is not going to blow itself up, and a civilization that's not going to bring down the ecosystem on its head, like with climate change. It's not the only kind of meaning that one can a society can supply to people. I mean, there's also the dignity of work, which has been an important part of various Western other societies. Um, uh, there's interpersonal relationships. But the national sense of purpose, of being in my generation, growing up with like Eisenhower, the first president I really paid regular attention to. We were the leader of the free world. We the world was a place where there was a division between people who were free, and there are a lot of good things about that, and people who are under the thumb of a totalitarian, godless regime like Stalin's, like Soviet Union. That was a mission, and it was important for the sense of the people as a people. So, what is our mission? Should always be making the world as it should be, and we don't get a lot of that even from our leaders. I mean, we do have the Paris Accords and stuff like that with respect to climate change, and we have nuclear nonproliferation treaties, but we don't have an ongoing conversation about where we need to get to. If this human experiment, this experiment that life's conducted with our species, of a civilization creating species, isn't going to result in a catastrophe, we got to be really motivated to get from here to there. There being the better world that we need to be to survive on this planet. So I don't know why. I don't think I have an insight into why is it that when FDR was the leader of the United States, he talked to us about look what we can be, and we don't get much of that in our politics now. I don't know why that is, but I think that it probably behooves us to create a vision of an ideal, to come to comprehend how essential it is that we move in the direction of that ideal, and to motivate the country to become the best America that we can become. As we fight the fascist forces taking power, we are essentially cast into a prophetic role. The prophet doesn't have power. He just has the power of speaking the moral and spiritual truth, condemning evil power. And that's what a lot of those guys did. Some of them paid with their lives. That's where the fight is right now. And it should be fought in those terms. The majority of the American people do not really favor evil. There's just too many of them that can't see it for what it is and understand the implications of something so broken wielding power in the world. There's a job to do, and I think providing people with a sense of a national mission to create the America we should be and to repudiate the America that's the opposite is how we wage that fight. Thank you. If you want to see my various efforts to make a coherent picture about what the nature of the drama is that we're involved in as Americans who want to preserve our democracy, and as human beings who want our civilization to develop into something which is not destructive and doesn't destroy itself. I believe that there is a power within the human heart of a moral and spiritual nature that needs to be summoned up right now, when the material power of the commander in chief of the United States and the lawmaking body of the United States and the Supreme Court are under the control of something which is manifested things you never would have thought would ever come to power in America. But there it is. And I can see no reason why our meaningfulness need can't be met by picturing ourselves as the saviors of a good thing from the damage that this evil thing on the that's taken power would inflict on it. Well, thank you. If you would subscribe, if you want to continue to follow my attempts to illuminate our situation here as Americans and our situation here as the creatures that stepped across the threshold into this new thing called civilization. Take a look at how it's laid out as coherently as I could on abetterhumanstory.org. And subscribe if you like what you're hearing. Thank you, and bye-bye.